Poll results for January 2022, and we're excited that you were able to join us today. We're going to be focusing on school choice because this is School Choice Week, and many thanks to Governor Cooper for signing a proclamation declaring that all North Carolinians should celebrate School Choice Week this week, and so we're definitely going to do that, and we're going to talk about the poll results in honor of Governor Cooper proclaiming it National School Choice Week. And we'll be joining our national partners in every state, making sure that parents not only know about all the educational options that they have available to them, but they pursue those options. And we're talking about homeschools, private schools, and public charter schools. We think it's very important to highlight all those different options and to discuss whether the public agrees with those options and feels that they should be expanded as we do. So if you would like to see the full poll results, please go to our website at johnlocke.org. You may also see a piece that I have written there on the John Locke Foundation webpage that discusses some of the poll results and some of the context surrounding those results. And if you're wondering who I am, I'm Terry Stoops. I'm the director of the Center for Effective Education here at the Locke Foundation. I am here with my partner in crime, Bob Lupke. Bob, tell them who you are.
Hi, I am Bob Lipke. I am a senior research fellow at the Center for Effective Education at the John Locke Foundation. Work with Terry. It's been about a year now, hasn't it, Terry, since our merger, but we are plugging along. Very happy to be celebrating this week, National School Choice Week, and to be sharing the results, a lot of good results from this poll.
Absolutely, and it's a pleasure to be here with Bob. It's also a pleasure to be here with our special guest who is joining us via Zoom, and that is Paul Skip Stam. And I know Bob and I are honored to have Skip on the call with us. He is not only a friend, but he has been a school choice champion for decades. He's an attorney practicing out of Apex, North Carolina. He served 16 years in the North Carolina House of Representatives. 10 of those years he served in leadership positions. He also serves on the board of the John Locke Foundation. He's a friend, he's a mentor, and we are thrilled to have him here joining us to talk about the January 2022 school choice poll. Skip, do you want to say hello?
Hi there. I'm excited. I've been talking to a dozen private school headmasters or headmistresses, and there's a lot of great education going on.
This is an exciting year as well, and not to preempt the poll, but this year it's very likely that North Carolina is going to hit a point where 1 in 4 children are in schools of choice, which is a remarkable milestone for this state and a remarkable testament to the work that Skip has done and so many other school choice advocates in North Carolina have done to advance school choice and make sure that parents everywhere in North Carolina have access to the educational options that are in the best needs of their children. So this is an exciting year. It's exciting to see how far school choice has come. And really, it would not have come this far without the work of individuals like Skip Stam. So we're thrilled to have them, have Skip as part of our discussion today. And we're going to get into the poll results right now. Now, one of the things that we always do is to talk about the methodology behind the poll. And this is a poll of 600 likely general election voters. The margin of error is plus minus 4. And this is a general poll of North Carolinians. And so we're going to see what these North Carolinians have to say about school choice. But first, I have to mention that part of our poll is always to assess the climate of politics, not only state politics, but national politics. And so we asked some general questions about the state of people's feelings about the Biden administration. You could see that people aren't feeling very good about the state of the nation right now or the presidency of Joe Biden. And of course, we don't want to really talk about that too much because we're telling people what they pretty much already know about how they feel about the nation, how they feel about the Biden presidency. So just let everyone know that these results about the national outlook are available on the John Locke Foundation webpage. That's johnlocke.org. Just look at the top and it says polls there. You just click on polls and the results of these polls will be available to you. I'll scroll very quickly about the dismal state of the Biden presidency as well as people's feeling about the nation. But we want to get into a discussion about some of Cooper, Governor Cooper, who, by the way, let me just reiterate, signed a proclamation declaring this National School Choice Week and about his handling of education matters. And you could see that there is some strong disapproval with the Cooper administration and his handling of education. I'm going to toss this off to Skip and ask for his take on why these numbers appear to show the governor is not very popular when it comes to his education policy.
Terry, it's partly because respondents to polls don't know exactly what the governor does or does not do. And in North Carolina, the governor does not have or at least in the last year or so, does not have a real direct connection to what happens in education. He does appoint most of the members of the state board of education, but they're very non-transparent. People don't really know what they do. He does have a role in the budget, and he did sign the budget, but he had very little input into the education parts of the budget that he signed, and he expressed a lot of dissatisfaction. Now, whether people are disapproving of him because he did not veto it or because he signed it, we'll just never know. The only thing he really had a direct contact influence on education the previous year was all the school mask mandates and things like that in the schools, but he has devolved that really to the local school boards. So I don't think people really know what he does and why that applies to education. But they're unhappy. I think they're mainly unhappy about what their local school boards are doing.
Bob, do you have any thoughts about Governor Cooper and his disapproval?
Yeah, actually, if you dig down into some of the numbers on this, the slippage with the governor and the slippage with President Biden, it's not that complicated. You look at our independent voters, which are almost the largest voting bloc in North Carolina now, or will soon be. They are slipping in their support of both President Biden and Governor Cooper. As you can see there, I think this last poll, it was 43% of independent voters are dissatisfied with Governor Cooper. So you can see when you have numbers that are a little less than half, that's a severe problem for the governor. And also, if you see amongst females, younger females on the 18 to 34 age cohort, those young women are also very troubled about the governor's policy. So if you look at that, and that makes a lot of sense, especially with this area, the issue area we're dealing with, which is school choice. But if you look at independence and then the opinion of young women, I think those help to explain some of Governor Cooper's problems.
That's excellent insight. Thank you, gentlemen. Now let's start getting into some of the specifics about some of the educational environment here in North Carolina. So we asked how people feel, how North Carolinians feel about teachers, unions, and school boards. And we got some interesting, albeit some predictable results in my mind about how people feel about those things. Skip, what's your takeaway from people's feelings about teachers, unions, and school boards?
Terry, most people know a teacher or know their children's teacher, and they like their teachers. So teachers are favorable. Whenever you put the term union with something, they don't like that too much. Only about a fifth of North Carolina teachers are in the union, the North Carolina Association of Educators, and they tend to blame the union for the problems, or they blame their local school board, and rather than the teacher themselves. And that's understandable. There's a great difference geographically how people look at the unions and the school boards. In the more liberal areas, they like. In the more conservative areas, that not so much. Big difference there.
Absolutely.
And as I say, it has a whole lot to do, I believe, with culture wars, cultural issues. You know, if they hear at their school that particular teachers advocating that girls turn into boys or vice versa, or if they don't like the local option on mask, that will inspire or influence their opinion on education generally.
Absolutely, Bob.
Yeah, some of this was as expected, as Skip has just outlined. I was a little surprised at somewhat the negativity on local school boards. I mean, you can make an argument, considering the times and the issues people are dealing with, that shouldn't be surprising. And, you know, you can say the plus or minus on any of those numbers is going to be a function of, you know, the popularity or the unpopularity of local school boards and the local culture, et cetera. But to have that net negative numbers, those are a little surprising, because historically, local school boards have not generated a lot of sentiment one way or the other. But obviously, in the last couple of years, with education becoming a much more visible issue, et cetera, I suppose we can say it shouldn't be surprising. I guess I'm talking myself out of the answer I originally gave. But to see the negativity on the local school boards, that's a little surprising. Now, you can speculate in certain areas where, in North Carolina, where those are school board decisions, you know, have been fairly controversial with regards to the issues like masking, closing schools, and so forth. That's all understandable, and I think some of the poll narrative talked about just the differences between Charlotte and Raleigh and how local cultures influence that. But I think that's something worth exploring a little bit more in depth, just how local cultures and how that negativity is, it's kind of a volatile thing. So.
And speaking of local school boards, we see just how polarizing they can be. Stronger partisan opinions than the unions do. As you mentioned, the coastal and central regions view school boards favorably, but unions unfavorably. And there's a prominent age and gender gap. So exactly what you gentlemen are talking about here is represented in the data. Some very, very interesting trends there that I would encourage anyone that is interested in really digging down into these numbers to go to johnlocke.org and to take a closer look at what some of these trends are for school boards, teachers, and the teachers union. So,
Terry,
yes, sir.
Could I stay on that chart for 1 second? Go
Absolutely.
Back to the start. Whereas the total favorable and unfavorable for school boards is essentially tied. If you look at the bottom of those two graphs, the very strongly favorable and strongly unfavorable, it is in the darker color, that's not tied. That's almost 3-to-1 unfavorable to the strongly favorable. Those the people who really care really don't like their local school board, and it can be on some things that have nothing to do with really education or ideology. But just give you an example. Wake County School Board a little while back will close the schools 2 days because of the possibility of rain. Ended up getting an inch of rain from Hurricane Dorian. This last weekend, it was closed Friday and Monday because of maybe snow that happened on Saturday. And it didn't snow at all on Friday, and it was completely clear on Monday. And that disrupts the lives of parents terribly to have to come up with new childcare arrangements at the spur of the moment. So it's things like that that can really irritate people about the operations of their schools. And it doesn't have anything to do with English or math or whatever, just the disregard of the needs of the parents.
No, that's absolutely right. And I have 2 boys in Wake County schools, and they endorsed the decision 100%, but I don't think anyone else did. Let's move on to just talking about how many respondents have children in school, and 30% of those that were surveyed here in the Civitas poll have children in school. And this is really one of the reasons some people may think that that's low is not recognizing that the poll takes into account individuals at all age groups, including age groups that typically don't have children in school. So it's important to say that this is actually fairly typical for the Civitas poll, and I don't think it is unusual as far as making sure that we have a section or a portion of the respondents that can speak to their experiences with children in school, as well as those who no longer have children in school. So that's just sort of a contextual slide. I'm going to move on to that because it's only interesting to people that really love digging into the data.
But Terry, could I say one thing about
Yeah, please do.
Go back. I bet when I was in school 50, 60 years ago, that figure in school was probably 50, 60, 70%. And people know, and so therefore there was a lot more. Anyway, the last census comparing 2010 to 2020 revealed something very interesting in North Carolina. We went up by almost 1 million new residents, but of those ages 0 to 17, it was less than 3,000. In other words, our state is getting much older and many fewer young kids. And that'll last a long time. You can't change that on a dime.
That's a good point, Skip. I remember, and this was a couple of years ago, I had come across a similar figure like this, but then I realized when I did a little digging that only 1 in 3 households in Wake County has a child in the Wake County public school system. So, and that's, it's the largest school district in North Carolina. People thought that would probably be a little different impact on families and kids and so forth, but it's interesting to get that perspective that families, the number of families as far as kids and as a proportion of all families, I mean, that's been declining, and it's an issue that affects a lot of things. So.
Yeah, especially the state budget. So there's a lot of implications that we'll have to explore in future polls. So thank you, gentlemen. 17% of parents have changed schools for their children. So this is an interesting question in the context of the pandemic. There was a lot of desire among parents last year to change schools, responding to the delivery of education, the unsatisfactory delivery of instruction through online learning that many parents believed was inferior. And many students actually seem to slide rather than advance in their education as a result of some of that online education, but also masks and various other issues. There was a strong desire for parents to change schools, really fueling school choice in North Carolina, I think, in a way that we hadn't seen in previous years. But I'll just pass along to Skip for observations about parents changing schools, their desire to change schools, the reasons why they might want to change schools, and whether it's just a matter of time before we see even more parents, after being tired of being subjected to policies that they don't necessarily agree with, decide to seek out a private, public charter, or homeschool option.
Terry, one observation. This is one where independents change schools twice as frequently as Democrats, 44 to 23%. Just an astounding number amongst independents who actually change schools. And Republicans are somewhere in between.
All right. Excellent observation. We'll go on to the next one. The quality of education is the main driver of transfer. So this is a question that we ask about: why are you deciding to transfer to a different school? And we give some options there, including school safety. There's being a quality of instruction and various other possibilities. And so we see that quality of instruction matters a lot to parents. Skip, what's your takeaway for this one?
Yes, in the debates in the assembly or in the debates in court, there's a lot of thought that, people are fleeing the traditional public schools, particularly for religious or philosophical reasons. And that is true, that's why a lot of those schools are founded. But the reason why parents of students move them there is primarily because they perceive it as better educational quality. And that is an issue that the liberals always say, well, how do we know they're of good, sufficient quality? Well, the parents know. The schools give tests. They're required to give standardized tests with national norms, not just state end of grade tests. And they believe that, yes, the educational quality is good. And not only is that good, but they have a much better record on school safety.
Absolutely. Bob, what do you think?
Just a little perspective. This number 41% is up from last year, which I believe was about 36%. So it's interesting that even though there are a fair amount of options down here as far as what the motivating factor is, the fact that it seems to be coalescing around quality of education more recently. I think it's significant. And also that there's a fair amount of space between quality of education and, the other options. So it's interesting to see how that's developing.
And I think Skip makes a key point that parents are a form of accountability. A lot of people talk about accountability only in terms of standardized tests. And that is a form of accountability, but another form, a stronger form, I believe, is parents. And so when parents are able to choose schools, they act as that accountability mechanism that makes sure that the school is delivering a high quality education. Otherwise, those parents will leave and take the dollars with them. So we can have discussions about accountability. We can hear people like Governor Cooper and some public school advocacy organizations talk about accountability only in terms of testing. But if I were to choose between two forms of accountability, one being parents and the other being standardized tests, I'll take parents every time. All right. And speaking of parents, there's a question that we ask about who is best suited to determine where a child should attend their school. And you can see that this isn't even close. Almost 78% believe that a child's parents or guardians should be the individuals that determine where their child attends school. Skip.
It's obvious, and even the self-described liberals, majority of them think it's true as well. And that's just something we're all agreed on. Not everybody, but sufficient consensus to operate on that opinion. So that means not just what type of school, but also which individual school, so that the traditional public schools would want to give opportunities for people to move from one school to another, as is possible in some school districts. Like, say the parent works 15 miles away, can they get their child into the school near where they work so they don't have to spend hours on a school bus? If you follow what I'm saying. And if
Absolutely.
It's a matter of private schools, do they have sufficient numbers of private schools so they can choose between a half a dozen in their county and not just one?
Bob, any takeaways, including the 11% of respondents that are courageous enough to trust their local school board to decide where their child goes to school? And when we say decide, they're essentially saying where you live decides where you go to school. So it's really not even a decision of the school board, because they have zoned assignment policies that really only take into account residents rather than the student's needs or the parent's desires.
Yeah, I wish I could answer that. I can't get inside their heads to really answer any of that. And there's a number down here, unsure amongst liberals, 24%. That I also was kind of eye-popping, I thought. So, but just a little background on this question. We've asked this numerous times over the last 10 years. I don't think it's ever been below 76. And it's usually always between that and about 80. So it's consistently really high. It's one of these questions that, apart from political philosophy, it always scores that high. I kind of dug a little bit into just this answer by race and came up with some figures. Whites, and again, this is for the preference parents. 79% of whites chose parents or guardians. 74% of blacks, 81% of Hispanics. So that gives you a little bit of a sense of perspective of how, that's strong across races.
It's a fantastic point. Thank you. On to the next question about whether parents agree or disagree with the statement, or respondents, agree or disagree with the following statement: parents should have the ability to choose where their child attends school. And we could see that these numbers are very similar to the last question about the desire for greater parental autonomy in being able to choose schools for children. So any takeaways from this question, Skip?
Yes, Terry. Many times I've heard advocates of school choice shorten the argument for it by saying it's a way to get children who are trapped in an underperforming school. And that may be the reason for some people to do it. I have never presented that as the argument. For example, you may be in a wonderful public school that they're going to make you be on a bus for 2 hours a day to get there. And your parents think it might be better use of your time to go to a private school 10 minutes away, or the curriculum is something you're more interested in taking Chinese and Arabic, and you don't want to take German, or you're being bullied in the otherwise good school, but you wouldn't be bullied. So parents and children have many reasons why they need the option. And I just wish we would not so often use the slogan of saying it's a way to get children who are trapped in an underperforming school.
Yeah, that's a good point, Skip. I also think it kind of reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of the concept of choice, because it does involve public schools. Charter schools are an option. Magnet schools are an option. Those options frequently get overlooked when we're talking about choice. Oftentimes, the conversation immediately goes to the private schools. But it reflects, just we've got some work to do as far as conveying, the public options as well as private in the public mindset of that issue.
That's a great point, Bob, especially the perception by many that public charter schools are actually private schools and require tuition payment, which is a real problem sometimes when trying to let parents know that they have the availability of going to a charter school, and parents feel like they have a tuition payment that would be due if they'd sent their child to a charter school. That's absolutely not the case. Charter schools are public schools, no tuition, and are fantastic schools, if I do say so myself, as someone that founded a charter school and sits on the Charter School Advisory Board.
Could I raise one more thought about that, the previous graph?
Yes, sir.
The argument that is chosen by the fewest people is that the existence of these school choice options would make the public schools do better. Well, there is academic evidence that's pretty strong that, in fact, that is true, that public schools do better if their school choice options are around them. Matter of fact, last I've read, there were like 34 peer-reviewed studies, and like 31 of them showed that as a very significant effect. That's more of interest to economists and maybe educational scholars, but it's not given enough publicity so that the opponents of school choice would realize that that's a really good effect on the public schools.
Bob, thoughts about that issue?
As far as Skip's specific point on how choice oftentimes strengthens local public schools, I would re-echo his points. There is a growing body of research that's showing that. I know there have been a number of studies in Florida that have done specifically that, show how local public schools that have had a number of charter schools prop up in the vicinity of the school, how those schools have actually led to an improvement in outcomes in the schools that were studied, the public schools. So it is a growing body of research, and it's a point that we need to inject into the discussion more.
Yeah, and let me just give a plug for EdChoice. EdChoice, if you go to their website, has a discussion of all the gold standard studies. These are studies that use randomized controlled trials to assess the different dynamics of private school choice. They look at things like competition, segregation, student performance, all of the major issues that we're going to be talking about today. And they find that on a whole, most of those gold standard studies reinforce the idea that all students benefit from different forms of private school choice when all of the factors, all the different demographic factors are taken into account through the gold standard studies that all us social scientists really value. So EdChoice, again, is a great place to go for a further in-depth study of some of that research that's available on private school choice. And speaking of segregation, that is one of the concerns that people have for these school choice programs and why they might oppose them. Skip, what's your thoughts about the idea that de facto this is not segregation that is codified in law but occurs outside of it, that some of these school choice programs will produce that?
Thank you, Terry. I may get on my soapbox here. This is one of the arguments that has the least validity. And sorry, I've got a decline. Uh-oh. Am I back?
Yes.
Okay. That was a phone call from my wife. I'll have to tell her why I declined.
That's okay. I just received one from my wife, too, letting me know that we're eating at IHOP tonight at 5 p.m. So go ahead, Skip.
Okay. All right, Terry. I've recently had to look at the handbooks and the demographics and all the data from about 24 private Christian schools. It is clear to me that this main argument against school choice, that it promotes de facto segregation, is just completely backwards. It actually, opportunity scholarships in general, promote integration. And if you think about it, since the scholarships themselves disproportionately, not majority, but disproportionately are given to African American students, and disproportionately they go to private Christian schools, it means that their private Christian schools are more integrated than before, and the public school systems from which they come are more integrated because of the disproportionate number of African American students in public schools. So it's exactly backwards. And one of the surveys of private school administrators given by NC State about 3 years ago, maybe 4, showed that one of the reasons that private school administrators like the Opportunity Scholarship Program is because it helped them diversify their clientele. So that's one reason. I'll come back to another one, but I'd like to hear of Bob's input on that.
Yeah, Skip, I would agree with much of what you say. Again, as Terry alluded to, there's quite a bit of research work on this very topic. EdChoice has actually done a good job in highlighting a number of the studies that they have that showed that has not been the case, that choices contributed to segregation. And if people want to go on their site and dig for those, that would really, I think, help to expound on that point. So there is research that will attack this notion. The other thing I wanted to bring up is that if you look at the breakdown here, if you look on the bottom of the chart, unsure is 37.9%. That's the largest option selected. Now, if we're talking about an argument that's profound and is visible in the public, how do you account for that number? I mean, it's 38%. It's the most chosen option. I also dug into the crosstabs on desegregation just by race. I just thought I'd share. Whites, 22%, chose that as the largest, or the option, their first option. Blacks were 38. Now, that is the highest option amongst blacks, but still it should be noteworthy, it's 38. It's not 80, it's not 70, it's 38. Now, it's something that has to be addressed, but I also think part of the discussion needs to be that there is a considerable body of research that shows that's definitely not the case, that choice does contribute to integration. I think we need to be more vigorous in moving that into the discussion, because too often a lot of our discussions get derailed by just this segregation impulse, and we haven't done a very good job of confronting it.
I agree. And the last time I checked, there were 7 peer-reviewed studies that looked at private school choice and segregation and integration, and 6 of those studies had found that there were positive effects for integration with private school choice programs, and 1 found negative effects. And one of the top researchers of this phenomenon is a researcher that I admire a whole lot from NC State University, Anna Egalite. And so right here in North Carolina, we have one of the top researchers looking at this, using the top methods, gold standard methods, to be able to assess the effects of school choice. And we find that overwhelmingly, this research is on the side of their decreasing segregation and increasing integration thanks to school choice.
Can
Let's
I
move on to the
elaborate a little bit?
Opportunity Scholarship. So we're going to start getting into the specific programs that North Carolina has for students. And the Opportunity Scholarship Program, as the question suggests, is a program for low and moderate income students. And it's a growing program. It's an incredibly popular program, and it looks to be expanding soon. So Skip, this is your baby. And we thank you for spearheading the effort to have opportunity scholarships in North Carolina. So tell us what you think of the program, where we've come, where we need to go.
We started small about in 2015, and we're now up to about 19,000 kids there today. And one thing, some news, for the next school year, there'll be another big expansion for two reasons. One, the maximum voucher can go up to about $5,900 instead of where it is today at $4,200. And that's basically catching up with inflation over the last 7 years. But that will make it, almost 100% of the tuition at many, many, many schools. The second thing is that's driving this expansion is that the income eligibility has gone up for a family of four from about $73,000 a year today to about $85,000 a year for the next school year. And there are many other expansions of eligibility, not only for opportunity scholarships, but also disability grants. As far as the poll numbers are concerned, you notice virtually every demographic group supports it. For the first time ever, the one group that usually, a demographic group that usually opposed it, now supports it. And that's self-described liberals. Yeah. Every other demographic group, every region, every race, every age supported it, except liberals. And this is the first one that I have seen, first poll I've seen that even liberals support it 51% to 30%. Now, is that a one-time aberration since we only had 137 self-described liberals? Perhaps. But I will posit another explanation is that maybe liberals who dominate the administration of the public schools have realized that if they can inspire some parents of school age, some conservative parents to get their schools out, they'll have a lot freer hand in the public schools. I don't know if that's the reason.
Let me just pause here to make sure that the audience knows if they have any questions to go on social media, Facebook, YouTube, and go ahead and post a question. We did have a couple questions come in, and we'll get to those in a little bit, but I want to welcome the audience to go ahead and pose questions to us and to our guest, Skip Stam, so that we can address some of the things that maybe we missed as we discuss this Civitas poll. So, Bob, your thoughts about the opportunity scholarships?
Yeah, I think Skip's emphasis on just the strength and depth of support bears reiterating. I think it's a testament to the program, how it's worked, and I mean, those numbers are very impressive. It's since 2015, Skip, right? I mean,
yeah, it was passed in 13, but it really wasn't operational until 15. Yeah.
So the depth of support is remarkable. Also, this is another question that we have frequently asked in previous polls, and I believe our numbers have always been between high 60s and low 60s. This is a popular program. In more recent years, as the program has grown in number and familiarity with the public, those numbers have gone up a little bit. This one I think is actually a little down from last year, 61%. I don't know if it's a momentary blip or whatever, but I also think some of the way that we've asked this question with allowing a neither support or oppose and an unsure option kind of combines some things which normally we would have pressed into one option or the other. So I think support probably would have, my guess is it would have gone up a little bit more, but still 61% is a very good number. Again, I dug into some of the crosstabs on race, 58% amongst whites support, blacks 63% support, Hispanics 74% support for the Opportunity Scholarship Program. So it's strong numbers across the board there.
If you're a parent and wondering whether you are eligible for the Opportunity Scholarship Program, want to take advantage of it, I would encourage you to contact the State Education Assistance Authority, which is the state entity that administers the program. But also you can reach out to Parents for Educational Freedom in North Carolina. That's PEFNC. They have a team that assists parents in being able to determine whether they qualify for an opportunity scholarship or any of North Carolina's private school choice programs. Again, that's PEFNC or the North Carolina State Education Assistance Authority. So I think it's important that if you're watching this and you're wondering whether your child or grandchild might be eligible, I encourage you to reach out to one or both of those entities. We did have a question that came in about whether we think that school choice will become a core election issue in 2022. And I think that's a good question to ask about people's thinking about opportunity scholarships and school choice when they go to the ballot box. And we could see that among a lot of our respondents, school choice is an issue that they think about when it comes to the election. Skip, we have 45.7% that are more likely to vote for a candidate in the 2022 election that supports the opportunity scholarships compared to just 22% that would be less likely.
And it's no surprise, Terry, that amongst parents, it's even slightly greater difference. What has always amazed me is that the Democratic Party leadership does not understand that its own members and especially the African-American legislative leadership don't understand that the people they claim to lead are much more supportive of this electorally than they are. And this shows virtually every demographic group being of the opinion that it would make them more likely to vote for that candidate. So the only one that's even close is self-described liberals, and there it's 36 to 28 who say that it would make a positive impact on their vote. And some of the others are just outstandingly high differences. Yes, it's a wedge issue. I'm told with some justification that this is what tipped the Georgia governor's election back in, I believe, 2018 and put Brian Kemp over the top in that election.
Well, we can add Florida and the recent race down there 2 years ago, also in that camp as far as school choice having an impact on the election. I know our friend Bill Maddox from the James Madison Institute wrote about that in the Wall Street Journal. It was the election of Governor DeSantis. So, and that, I mean, as Terry said, I think it is an issue, whether pundits or politicians want to recognize it or not. It's an issue that matters to parents. It's an issue that matters to a lot of people, and it will be discussed.
Yeah, and you know what's really encouraging is seeing so many lawmakers and elected officials on social media talk about National School Choice Week and celebrate what it means to their constituents and to really be very outspoken about their support for school choice. And so I think there's a recognition, especially among those in the Republican caucus, that they understand that their voters are going to the polls wanting candidates and wanting to vote for candidates that support school choice and things like opportunity scholarships. So let's in our last 10 minutes here, talk briefly about charter schools, public charter schools. And we could see that there is still some lingering doubts about public charter schools among Democrats and liberals. Skip, what's your thought about the fact that while there is very solid support among respondents, that certain demographic and ideological groups continue to oppose public charter schools?
Well, amongst Democrats, it's 50-50. Amongst liberals, it's self-described liberals, it's actually a majority opposed. And this is sort of unclear to me, or surprising to me, why they would have more opposition to charter schools than to opportunity scholarships for private schools, because charter schools in many respects are public. They don't charge tuition. They have to take some of the same tests. It's just surprising to me. One of the arguments that they use a lot is that charter schools take away funding from traditional public schools. Now, there may be a case in some rural, declining population counties where that might be the case, but overall, it doesn't cost the traditional public schools a penny, because when they lose funding, they also lose the students that they are paying for. But that principle of mathematics has never been a strong suit of public school administrators.
Bob, public charter schools.
Just to kind of amplify on Skip's point on the hardening amongst Democrats and liberals, I just wanted to share that you've got to remember that's somewhat of a recent phenomenon, the hardening, because even President Obama, who was supporting charter schools, and there was a softening amongst Democrats, and we could see that in the polls. When he got out of office, obviously charters became an election issue for many Democrats. We saw that in 2020, and we saw how a lot of candidates danced around that. But the point is, I wanted to say that is President Obama did try, to change that. There was a softening amongst some Democrats with regards to support for charter schools. So maybe that's an opening or a sign of hope that at some point in time we could make some inroads there.
Absolutely. And North Carolina has over 200 charter schools enrolling about 130,000 students. And we have two charter school advocacy organizations, the Coalition for Charter Schools and the Association of Public Charter Schools. Both do fantastic work here in North Carolina, ensuring that we have a strong charter school sector in the state. So let's move on to our last couple questions here. This one deals with a learning loss ESA. I'm going to go to Bob real quick so he can explain what an ESA is, and then we'll get Skip's take on this question.
An ESA, shorthand for education savings accounts. It's kind of a misnomer because it's not a college savings account. It is an account, taxpayer-funded account, that parents control, that they can use for their child's education expenses. North Carolina already has a special needs account that parents can use for appropriate expenses. It's popular, and I believe ESAs will be the future of school choice. Learning loss, obviously a big issue with regards to the pandemic. There are a number of states that have tried to address that via tutoring, providing parents the opportunity to use an ESA to address the specific needs of their children. North Carolina actually drafted some legislation last year to do just that. We're hoping that we can appropriate some of the federal money that's been distributed via the pandemic to do just that this year. So we asked that question. We came up with, obviously, as you can see, a lot of support for that issue amongst a wide group of people. And I mean, I'm hoping that as these numbers get out, the people that we're going to, put this idea before see the depth and the breadth of the support that we have for this issue. Tutoring has been shown, personal tutoring has been shown as one of the best ways to remediate learning loss and to help bring up kids to where they need to be academically. So we're hoping to bring those two tools together and hope to be able to provide parents some needed relief, with regards to some of the problems that their kids are facing.
Excellent. Skip, thoughts on this question?
Just briefly, this was one of the disappointments of the last legislative session, that with all the federal money sloshing around the school system, just billions, that we couldn't get any for making up the pandemic-related learning loss in this form. I don't really have an explanation for why that didn't happen.
Yeah, definitely disappointing. Parents are absolutely concerned about learning loss. In fact, everyone in North Carolina is concerned about learning loss, except for Tamika Walker-Kelly, the president of the NCAE, who called it a false construct. And then let's go to our last question, talking about greater flexibility for parents' tax dollars. It's a big, popular idea. And you can see the support is over 68%. Skip, thoughts about greater flexibility for how those tax dollars can be directed, putting parents in control?
Terry, there are many functions of government that we really wouldn't want to put in the hands of parents. But here, where it's the education of their own children, it makes a lot of sense. And all the programs that we've discussed, the opportunity scholarships, the disability grants, which we haven't discussed today, but are very much in that nature, the personal education savings accounts are a way of getting that flexibility. And people like it. They like it. We ought to do it.
Absolutely. So we have a question that I really wanted to get to before time is up. And the question is this: with the shifting demographic landscapes in North Carolina, do you think school choice will become more popular or less? And Skip, I'm going to pose that question to you. The shifting demographics, individuals coming from other states where there may not be as much school choice, an aging population perhaps, but more importantly, demographic shifts with population decreases in rural communities and increases in urban and suburban communities. Do you think any of those factors will play a role in the popularity of school choice?
We've been having this same demographic shift for the last 10 or 20 years, and support has continued to rise. And I think it will continue to rise, but I don't really think, for example, people come from other states, that can either increase or decrease depending on which states they came from. I think the aging of our population will not help on school choice because it's parents that really are concerned about it. But I think the other parts of it, other demographic changes will increase it. But it really is not based on demographic change, but rather what people see in the school system, what they see in children, and rhetorical successes by the advocates of school choice more than the opponents.
Well, 30 seconds to weigh in on school choice as an election issue.
Well, I think it is an issue. I think even what Skip had said with regards to changing demographics and so forth, I think that how I'd answer that is that will force to ahead school choice issues. I welcome that, and I think we should welcome that because it provides, I think, a larger and a much needed platform to show the advantages of choice, to show how it helps not only students that get the education, get a better education, but their families, society at large. And I think we should welcome those changes. And do I think that it will be an election issue this year? You bet. It'll be a big issue.
Well, I want to thank you both. Skip, thank you so much for joining us. As always, your insight is fantastic and much appreciated. Thank you, Bob. I just want to let the audience know that these poll results are available on the John Locke Foundation website. That's johnlocke.org. And if you have any additional questions after reading the poll or examining some of the things that we've written about the poll, both from me and Bob, feel free to contact us here at the John Locke Foundation. You can look up the Center for Effective Education under the Centers tab at the top of the web page, and contact information for me and Bob will be there. And if you have any other questions about other education issues, Bob and I would be happy to answer those questions, or happy to direct you to the individuals that can answer those questions. So thank you so much. We look forward to presenting the February poll around this time next month. Please stay tuned for notice of the February poll luncheon that we will have. Hopefully touch on some of the education questions we didn't get to this time around. So thank you again, and have a wonderful